When Emerson asks, to what end is nature, he essentially answered that question through the other sections of this book, the middle sections. He comes up with four uses of nature. Now, these are very lengthy and they're very involved, and we don't have time to go through each line by line, but suffice it to say that he boils things down and answers the question by saying there are four basic reasons why nature exists, hence ends of nature. The first one, and it's the shortest section because he wants to spend the least amount of time on it possible, is commodity. It exists as a means of providing our practical needs. This is the way he argues most people think of nature. That is, it supplies us with food, it supplies us with raw materials to make the comforts and physical and material comforts of life. And so he doesn't really want to spend a lot of time on it because he says, essentially, by the end of the book, he says, this is the problem, is that we're used to thinking of nature only in this way, or primarily in this way. So he doesn't spend an awful lot of time on it because he figures that's what everybody already thinks of nature as. You look out on a forest and you see lumber. You look at a mountain and you think coal mine. You think only of the practical ways that you can make things and shape things and engineer things out of it. And it's certainly one of the most important reasons why nature exists, he argues, but it's not the only reason. The second reason, and this is a really important reason as well, is beauty. It exists to provide beauty. Now, there's no utility in beauty. Think about this. Human beings are the only creatures that we know of anyway that basically enjoy nature because it is beautiful. I don't know about you. I have a dog. It's a beagle. He doesn't really look at sunsets and admire it for its beauty. He just thinks, hey, it's close to dinner time. But in Emerson's world, he says, this is really an indication, a hint that there's more to nature, for human beings anyway. There's more to nature than simply utility. Because there is absolutely no practical utility in admiring nature as a thing of beauty. What is the practical utility in it? Why are we as creatures capable of admiring the beauty of something? Why do we have that capacity? It certainly doesn't promote our survival in any way. I mean, admiring sunsets, waterfalls, these sorts of things because they're beautiful, landscapes because they're beautiful, don't really help us survive. Admiring the beauty of a tree or the beauty of a flower. I mean, we don't eat flowers. Flowers aren't essential to survival. So that's a hint, Emerson and other romantics would say, that there's something more to us than simply brutish animalistic behavior. And there's something more to nature, at least to us, that can be gleaned than simply practicality. Now, when we get into the section on language, now we're starting to get very complex. The last two sections here, the last two uses of nature, however, that is to say, in the middle portion of the text, are where we get rather complex. His notion on language is very important. There's a lot borrowed here from Coleridge. There's no question about that. This is not all 100% original, but it does have a sort of Emersonian twist to it. He begins with two propositions from which he deduces a third proposition, and that is that, number one, words are signs of natural facts. What does he mean by that? Well, according to Emerson, all language comes from nature. I mean, what else would it come from, essentially? Words are signs of natural facts. The most basic types of words we have come from natural phenomena. They are metaphor for physical things. Ideas are metaphors. Words are based on natural things. They are more often than not metaphorical. At their most basic, words are onomatopoetic, right? Words are reproductions of sounds in nature. So, Emerson is really interested in saying, in going all the way back and tracing, where do words come from? What is the origin of words? And what he argues is that words are either basically some sort of onomatopoetic thing, or they might be metaphor. But if you trace the origins of words far enough back, they come directly from our experiences with nature. And so he's wanting to redirect us there because we've allowed words in a highly literate society, as 19th century America was, we've allowed words to sort of become disconnected from their natural origins. That's the basic of what he's trying to say here. The second proposition is that particular natural facts are symbols of particular spiritual facts. Now, this is where we get into the heart of Romanticism. The Romantics believe, and this is going to be true of Hawthorne, it's going to be true of Melville, it's going to be true of almost all of the Romantics, that natural facts are symbols of spiritual facts. That is to say, that when you go out into nature and you see a tree, you see a waterfall, whatever it happens to be, there is something more than just simply that surface level phenomenon at play there. There is something to be learned from it. There's some sort of spiritual truth that's being communicated through the existence of that natural fact or that natural object. You say, well, it looks just like a big rock to me. I don't see any spiritual fact. That's because you're not tuning yourself into that. You have the capability of learning spiritual truths through observing natural phenomena. Not everybody will do it. Not everybody wants to do it. That's a great shame, according to Emerson, but everybody has the capacity to do that. And to the extent to which that you observe nature in order to glean spiritual facts, that is walking out into a valley and not just noticing how pretty it is, not just noticing how much farmland might be available there to till for practical use, but to try to come away with some spiritual facts. It could be something as simple as, for example, noticing the seasons of the year. And what does that tell us about life? Well, life has its seasons, you see. Noticing animals and how they behave, and coming away with some sort of larger spiritual point about our existence and our position in the universe. To look at ants as Thoreau does when he looks at underneath his Walden Pond cabin and sees the ants going at it and having a sort of battle royal there. When he observes chipmunks or squirrels out in nature doing what they do and saying, there's a message here for me in their behavior. There's a message here for me in their life cycle. There's a message here for me in how they comport themselves and how they interact with their natural surroundings. There's a message here for me in how every creature and every component of the natural world has a role, has a place, fits into some larger scheme. So the idea that all of these natural phenomena have some sort of spiritual truth or fact being communicated through them at any given time, and many times more than just one, you see. That is a very fundamentally romantic thing, and it's at the very, very heart of Emerson's book here. It is the basis, the bedrock of his entire philosophy on how we should approach nature, that it is essentially a script or a text to be read. And if you don't get it, it's not because you don't have the capacity, it's because you've never tried to get it. Try to imagine, here's a metaphor for you. Try to imagine that we all have we're walking around as laptops, you see, and we have Wi-Fi capability, and there's Wi-Fi signal out there for us to reach. Just because we don't have our laptop turned on so that we can get Wi-Fi internet access doesn't mean that the Wi-Fi internet access isn't there in that particular spot. We just haven't turned our computers on, our laptops or our iPads on to pick up that signal and tune into it. And what he's saying is everybody's walking around with that Wi-Fi capability. It's just that not everybody is using it, and that's the problem. Ultimately, the grand theory that he's putting forward here is that nature is a symbol of spirit. It's the counterpart to it, essentially. That is, that what we see when we see nature is this kind of symbol or representative or metaphor of God. It's not God. It's not the same thing. This is not pantheism. Pantheism is the notion that everything, all matter together collectively is God. That's not transcendentalism, so don't confuse it. Instead, nature is this kind of symbol or metaphor for God. And by looking at nature, we can look at something that looks like God, although it's not God. Okay. Another way to think of it is this. Let us suppose, for example, that you took a sheet, a very, very thin, gauzy sort of sheet, and you laid it on top of a model of, for example, New York City, complete with the Empire State Building and the Statue of Liberty and the Trump Tower and all of that, and Manhattan and everything. And you had a perfect scale model of it, and you laid this very, very thin, gauzy, silky sheet over the top of it. And you could see, even if you couldn't see the model itself, you could see by the impression of the buildings through the gauzy sheet that overlaid it that this was New York, right? Now you're not looking at New York and you're not looking at the model, but you're looking at sort of a representation, an impression of New York City. You see? So that's what Emerson is saying nature is. It is almost the same thing as looking at the face of God when you look at nature that way. Now, in the final section here, discipline, that's where we realize that nature's highest function is to teach us. So if you buy what he says in language, that words are signs of natural facts, particular natural facts are symbols of particular spiritual facts, and therefore nature, in bottom line, nature is the symbol of spirit. Well, why would it be the symbol of spirit? Well, because the Godhead, the Oversoul, whatever you want to call it, the me, the spirit of the universe, wants us to learn about the Oversoul, the rest of the me, through an observation of nature. So nature has a teaching function. Don't think of discipline as being, correcting somebody with a stick or a belt or something like that. Discipline in the sense of, the study of something, right? The discipline of, the martial arts disciplines and mathematics is a discipline and so on and so forth. There are two types of learning according to Emerson, and this is very interesting. There's reason, which is practical learning, practical knowledge. If I drop a book, it hits the floor. How do I create a right angle? How do I make water flow downhill? What are the laws of the physical universe that allow me to build a building or dam a river or something like this? This is reason. This is sort of practical kinds of day-to-day, how to function within the universe and not get your head cut off kind of knowledge. Understanding is deeper, spiritual, and intuitive. It's at its heart intuitive knowledge. That's the putting everything together. Reason is to figure it out. Understanding is to know it directly, intuitively, straight from the Godhead through the conduit of nature. Okay? So, we all need both types of knowledge. There's nothing wrong with reason, but it's understanding the big picture, the understanding of why are we here, the big questions in life that people are not asking about and answering according to Emerson. That's a big, big problem.